Hello, welcome everyone to the webinar today. My name is Meg and I'm part of your frevvo customer success team. And I've also got Ashish on the line who will be answering some questions and helping us show you how we can use frevvo and Google integration for all of your dynamic forms, workflows, and even to authenticate your users. So the plan for today is we'll do a quick overview of what frevvo is, especially for those of you who might be new to frevvo. We'll then talk about all the things you can do with frevvo and Google Apps using the Google connector. And the most fun part, I'm sure everyone is here for, is the demo. So we'll spend the bulk of our time showing you how these things actually work. You can ask questions at any time using your GoToWebinar control panel on the right. Well, for most of us, it's on the right. And Ashish will answer your questions as we go along, but we'll also save some time at the end to take questions. So frevvo is basically a workflow software. We help automate and digitize all of your everyday business processes. One of the big advantages of using frevvo is that you don't need an IT department. You don't need to know how to code. It's very user-friendly from a business user perspective. And for that reason, we have hundreds of customers across a number of different verticals. We're serving customers in education, both K through 12 and higher ed, doing processes that are both internal to the school, like their admin processes, but also, student touching connected processes, which is just fantastic. We're also working with several governments, including the police departments, and lots of other businesses and industries. So you probably see some familiar names on the screen there. And these customers are using frevvo to automate a number of different processes. So one example would be a new hire onboarding. If you remember doing this process in paper, it's a lot of different forms, and every single form you need to put your name, your address, your social security number over and over again. And then the HR department probably has to, read that, send it back to you if there was an error, then input that data into some other system. With frevvo, you can turn all of those forms into a single digital workflow. The user only needs to enter information once, and frevvo will map it through to all the relevant forms. And then frevvo can also produce your custom PDFs like the IRS W-4 or your health insurance forms where a very specific PDF form is needed. Frevvo will simply take all your electronic data and map it to that form for you. So it streamlines this process both from the user perspective and from the HR department who needs to process those forms. You can see a few other examples on your screen here, and we're actually going to look at a few of those in the demo and how our Google integration can streamline them even further. So frevvo offers complete enterprise-grade features. We're going to be highlighting today the Active Directory or Security Manager, I should say, which is integrating with your Google authentication. And we're going to be highlighting the integration with Google Apps like Google Sheets, Google Docs, and Google Maps. Now, we also offer legally binding signatures, which we'll briefly look at. As I mentioned, custom PDF mapping. We offer frevvo in any language worldwide, and it's also mobile friendly. Without doing a single lick of work, all the forms will automatically be responsive on any mobile device. So lots of great features for all of your business needs. And that really takes us into what can you do with frevvo and Google together? And there are lots of things you can do. The number one thing is you can have your users authenticate through Google. So instead of having your users, have yet another account, yet another password, you can simply use single sign-on to provide your users simple access to frevvo and also to just further secure your frevvo forms and data. We'll show you how all this works when we get to the demo in a minute. You can also integrate with Google Sheets, so we can read data from a Google Sheet into your form. Customers are using this for things like populating a dynamic dropdown or even determining a workflows routing so that it goes to the correct manager or approver for each individual that submits the form. We can also write submission data to the Google spreadsheet, and this is especially cool because you don't need any code. It's all point and click setup. And this is a great way to sort of store your submission data in a way that you can share it with people within your organization, or further manipulate it once it's down in Google Sheets. And you can also, similar as you write to Google Sheets, you can update Google Sheets, take a specific row and update it with data from your form. Now, you can also integrate similarly with Google Docs. So you can save your submission documents, like the PDF snapshot, to a Google Drive folder. So even though frevvo's built-in submissions repository offers, you can set up access control to that and give your users permission to see those submissions, some customers prefer to send their submission documents right to Google Drive so that they can save them into folders that are already shared with a group of users, divided up and with access control the way that they use it in their organization. So we're just seamlessly integrating with your existing system, which is really nice. And then we've got some cool things that you can do with maps. You can add a map to any form or workflow, and you can even calculate mileage, which folks are using for expense report and travel request type forms. So with that, we're going to go ahead and jump over to a demo. So I'm going to switch to a tab here, which is actually a Google space. Now, not a Google space, I'm sorry, a frevvo space. I'm saying the word Google a lot today. So a frevvo space is a portal where all of your forms and workflows exist. Now, if you have forms and workflows that are publicly available, you'll be able to see them even when you're not logged in. But for today, I actually want to show you some forms that I can only see when I'm logged in, and I want to show you how you can authenticate through Google. So I'm going to click the login button, which is just what your users will do. And you can see that I'm redirected to the Google login page here. So I can select the user I want to log in as, and for now I'll log in as myself. And now you can see that I have this extra HR tab, which is only visible to logged in users. Now I'm going to go to the app, coming out of the space for a moment, and I'm just going to log in as the tenant admin in this tenant, just to show you quickly where this authentication is set up. So when you create a new tenant in frevvo, you're going to select the SAML security manager, and then you'll enter your metadata and some other information to connect it to your Google authentication. Now, that's like a super fast overview of the process. Our documentation walks you through every step of the way, where to find that metadata, where to get all the information that you need, and how to set up your frevvo security manager. So that's just briefly how it works, but it's really great because, again, you could see I was able to log in with just a click as a user really seamlessly. So the next thing I want to show you is how we integrate with Google Sheets and Google Drive. So I'm going to open this permission form, which is ironically, or perhaps not ironically, a permission form to use Google Apps, and we're going to use Google Apps with it. This is a form that a school might have parents fill out. Many schools used something very similar to this last year when about a year ago, actually, when the COVID-19 pandemic became a big deal and a lot of schools had to go to remote learning all of a sudden. And they needed a quick way for parents to fill out this permission form. They couldn't really rely on paper going home in backpacks and coming back to school because kids weren't coming back to school. So a lot of our customers created these Google forms, or sorry, frevvo forms very quickly. You can see that they're really nicely customized with your logo. They've got clickable links. And then the parent simply fills this out. Now I'm going to change the name here. We've got a default name in here for quick demo, but I'm just going to change it for today. So you pick the student's name. You've also got a drop down for the different schools in the district. So I'll pick Roy, and then you can pick the grade that the student is in. The parent can either select yes or no for permission, and then they can actually sign the form right here with their mouse or their finger on a touchscreen. Now, this particular signature is what we call a wet signature or an inked signature. It does not require the user to be authenticated, even though I happen to be authenticated here. You could have this form just embedded on your website where any parent can fill it out without necessarily having an account. We do have, and I'll show you in a few moments, we do have PKI encrypted, legally binding digital signatures that serve a very similar purpose, and frevvo has some feature on the roadmap to do more of an email signature authentication as well if you need more lockdown on that. I'm also going to enter my email so that a copy of this form can be sent to me, and then I click submit. So really very simple from the user perspective, easy as pie. And now let's see where that submission went. So if I come over to my Google Drive, I have a folder here called Google Integrations Demo. And then I have subfolders that are named for the different school names that you saw in my dropdown. Now, I think I picked the school Roy for that demo, sure enough. And here is Jared's PDF, automatically saved right into this folder just as we filled it out. So you can kind of imagine that a school might want to have each school's administrators only have access to their school's folder. So you set that up yourself in Google, and then you just configure your frevvo form to write down to the correct folder based on that runtime data. Now we also have a Google Sheet where we're sending these submissions. So you can see line 13 here is the Jared submission that I just put in. It automatically just wrote a new row to this Google Sheet. And once it's here, all of the other cool things that you love about Google Sheets, like calculations and conditional formatting, as you can see I have here on the permission column, even charts and graphs if you want to do that. There's really no restrictions. You can use all the great features of Google Sheets with your frevvo submission data. Now, one other thing to point out is that frevvo supports worldwide languages, and that includes right to left languages. You can see I have a name here in Hebrew, and it looks just fine on this Google Sheet. So all of that is really seamless. And then I also got an email, hopefully, there it is, with a copy of that same PDF. So this is sent to me as the parent or person who filled out the form. So that's really the basics of how that works, but let's go ahead and look at how you would set that up in Google. So now I'm logged in as the designer, and I'm going to take a look at this form from the frevvo designer's perspective. So I'm in here, this is my form canvas where I'm going to set up the layout of the form. And I've got several controls, which are basically the fields in my form. Now this top left one is actually an image control where you can upload your business's logo, so you can really customize this form and make it look exactly how you want it. Several of these other controls are read-only message controls, which you can edit them with our rich text editor, or they take any HTML markup. So you can, again, customize font, size, color. You can even add clickable links, images, lots of cool stuff in these read-only controls. Then we have several input controls, including that drop-down where we select a school. And this is the signature control that I showed you earlier, which we had just dragged from the palette. Now, this is how the form is set up, but how do we get all of this stuff to go over to Google? We're going to go over to the Settings tab and click Document Actions. Document Actions is basically what happens to my data after my user clicks Submit. So in this case, we're going to do both send documents and we'll send data. Let's look at documents first. So we pick these actions, send to Google Drive, and then we're basically going to provide our credentials. Now this access token is not your regular Google password. This is an OAuth token. And if you look at our Google documentation, one of the first steps of the Google connectors to obtain an access token. So if you're on the cloud, you just click a link. If you're on premise, it'll kind of help tell you how to construct that URL. And this link goes to a dialog that will help you connect your frevvo designer to your Google account. So once you're connected, it'll give you an OAuth token, which is a big long string. You want to save that to a safe place, like your password manager, and then you'll paste it here into this access token, and that way you can log in. Once you're logged in, this folder dropdown is going to show me all the folders I have available in my Google Drive. So I pick the one I want. And then the submission folder is, I've set this up to use a template that refers to the student school. So if you remember back on this form, I have this student school dropdown, and the name of this control is student S school. So when I'm over here configuring my Google connector, I've named the folder Student S School in these curly braces, which tells frevvo to get the runtime value of that control and then set it as the folder name. And then when it gets to Google, Google will say, does this folder already exist? If it does, which it did in our example, it's going to save the PDF to that existing folder. If the folder didn't exist, say I had selected a school that didn't have a folder yet, it would create a folder for that school and then save the PDF to it. So that's a really nice dynamic way to set up your Google Drive. The next thing we're going to do is send the data to Google Spreadsheet. So you're going to use your same access token and log right in. I have a lot of Google Sheets, so it takes a second. So then in this case, the dropdown shows me all the sheets I have available. Now you can see I have about 4,000 because I like Google Sheets, but I'm gonna pick the one that I wanna save it to, and then I'm gonna pick the tab name of that sheet. So in this particular case, I did not rename that tab, it's just called Sheet 1. So we're naming Sheet 1, but you can actually see in the dropdown other tabs that would be available. And that's going to automatically save your submission data to a new row in that sheet, as long as the column header matches the name of the control. Now, one thing that's really nice is, for example, with student school, if you remember, the actual control name was student capital S school with no space. And here I have student lowercase s space. Spaces and case sensitivity don't matter on the Google Sheet side of it. So you can have these named in a little bit of a friendly fashion for your users to read. And as long as the characters match the characters in your control name, you should be good. So that's how that's set up. And as you can see, no code needed whatsoever. It's all point and click and pick from dropdowns. And then this automatically sets up your form the way you need it. So very cool stuff. So the next thing I wanted to show you is how we can read from a Google spreadsheet and update a Google spreadsheet in order to have a really dynamic workflow. So for this, I'm actually going to be using this Google spreadsheet called Employees GS and the Vacation tab. Now, if you look at this Vacation tab, I've got all of my employees listed. I've got their employee ID, which remember that because that will be important. And then it tells me who their supervisor is. And this is actually the supervisor's user ID. So our frevvo form is going to pick up this supervisor, and it's going to set it in the assignment for that supervisor to approve our leave request. Then you'll see that the amount of leave the person is due annually is there, how much they've taken so far this year, and then a little Google spreadsheet calculation to show their available leave in the 3 different categories. So just to give you a little frame of reference for what this frevvo form is looking at, let's see, I'm going to log out and log in as a an employee, I should say. Okay, so I'm going to click login, and this time around, I am going to log in as an employee named Tom. So we'll go to this HR tab, which is only for people who are logged in, and we'll click the vacation request workflow. So this form, if you notice, automatically picked up my frevvo ID. So there's a business rule running behind the scenes in this form that just tells the form to look at my logged in user ID and populate it in this control. Then it's actually going to the Google Sheet and reading the manager ID from here. And it's also reading the annual vacation days that are available. So you can see those are now populated in the labels of these three controls. So if I were to log in as a different user, you would see a different manager and different available leave. So we'll pick a start date. We'll start tomorrow. And you'll also notice that this drop down has been set to only allow Tom to pick up to the number of days he has available. So in annual, he has 8 available, but in floating, he only has 1 available. So again, this is all set by reading that Google Sheet in the background and then setting this up through a business rule. So we'll just say we're going to take 1 vacation day. We'll take Friday off. Now you could, if you needed to, choose a file to upload if you needed to, show your supervisor that you really were sick or whatever documentation you needed for that leave. And then you sign the section. Now this signature, different from the one we looked at earlier, is a PKI encrypted signature. So because I'm an authenticated user, this signature is basically checking out that I am who I say I am and confirming it. Puts a name stamp and a date stamp right here on the form. And then you can see it also locks down all the information inside that section. So no one can edit it except Tom if he clicks edit this section. So we will click continue. And now the next thing I want to do is actually log in as the manager, Jerry, and I'm going to log in from my cell phone. So give me just a moment. I'm going to bring up my cell phone here for you. Let's see. There we go. Okay. So you should now see this is the same exact space, but on a mobile device. So instead of the tabs across the top, we've got these nice little thumbnail icons that make it a little bit easier to read and navigate from the mobile device. So just as I did before, I'm going to log in. I think that this phone might already know that I'm Jerry. So, oh, there it is. Good. So you can see my account. I'll log in as Jerry. And now I see this vacation request form, and I also see this task list at the top. And that's actually where I'm going to go. The task list will show me that Tom has submitted a vacation request for me to take a look at. So I'm going to open that up. And as the manager, I can see all the information that Jerry provided. I can type in a little comment, sign it again with that same encrypted signature. So easy to do from a cell phone, just a tap of a finger. And then I'll click continue. And that is going to send the workflow to the next step, which is actually HR processing. All right, so let's get that down. Minimize. There we go. And so the next thing I need to do is log out of here as Tom and log in as a user. Now I happen to have this third step for HR processing is assigned to a role, which is a group of frevvo users. So basically that third task is going to be assigned to all of them. Anyone who has the HR role, maybe there's 5 people in that department, they will all get the email and have an opportunity to perform that. I'm going to log in as Sue, again, using my same Google account or Google Authenticator. Now, Sue happens to have the HR role, so when she goes to her task list, she can see the vacation request. and she can approve it just like Tom did. But she's going to do one more thing, which is update the Google Sheet to show that Tom's leave was approved and sort of tick up his annual taken. So if we look a little closer at this Google Sheet, we see that Tom currently has 12 taken and 8 available. So if you remember, we had 8 rows in that drop down. When Sue clicks update the Google Sheet, we should see this tick up, the annual taken tick up to 13 and the annual available tick down. So let's try it. Sue clicks update. A business rule is running in the background that goes over and updates this Google Sheet. And sure enough, annual taken is 13, and the Google Sheet calculation has set the annual available down to 7. So this makes it really easy for the HR department to kind of track and monitor everyone's available and taken leave with just, all through this digital frevvo form. No paper, no double entering things, no human error. It's all taken care of. And then Sue's going to go ahead and finish that form. So let's actually log out as Sue, and we will go back into our app as the designer and just take a quick look at this workflow to see kind of how we set it up to do all of that stuff. So let's see, here's the vacation request. So, and when you look at this workflow, you'll see that it's got 3 steps. The vacation request is the part Tom filled out. The supervisor approval, which is assigned to that manager ID. And again, that's using a template, just like we did earlier in the curly braces, which is looking at a field in the form called manager ID. Right here, and that manager ID is getting picked up from the Google Sheet. So you can kind of see how it all worked together to assign that step dynamically to Jerry. If I had logged in as, say, Walter, oh, Walter also has Jerry, but if I had logged in as Bobby, it would have assigned the second step to Tom. And then the HR processing step, just to show you, is assigned to a role. This is just a role I have built into frevvo. And then what I'm going to show you, instead of showing you my actual rules, I'm going to actually take you back over to the documentation. So we wrote a business rule to both read from that Google Sheet and then update it. And those business rules are documented here in our Google Connector docs. It's very simple, just 4 simple steps. And actually one of them you've already done because it's obtain the access token, right? And some people get a little nervous when they see all this code, but what's really nice about the way our Google Connector and our documentation work together is that you can literally copy this rule code, paste it into your own form or workflow, and then just add in your own Google credentials, your own spreadsheet name, and then the fields from your form. So you're literally cutting and pasting and then just changing a few specifics in that rule. It makes it really easy. So this rule is basically logging into frevvo for you, and then it's running this query to see if the customer name, in this case it was employee name, matched the value that was in your form. Now, updating a Google Sheet does something very similar, and same thing, you can just copy and paste this rule code right over to your form. It's going to log in, and again, it's going to query a specific tab in your worksheet based on, it's looking for a specific row. So in this case, it's looking for the employee ID in order to populate that employee's specific vacation. So easy peasy. All right, so let's come back over to our space. Just a sec here. And sorry for all the flipping back and forth. It's, I have to demo as multiple users here. So that pretty much shows you the Google Drive and Google Sheet features. There's so much cool stuff you can do with that. And our users are using Google Sheets in really dynamic ways. We have a school that uses it to do a graduation request, or a petition to graduate. And because a student might have, one or more majors and minors, the form is super dynamic. So they, if they pick one major department, it'll ask them what their major is just in that department. And all those dynamic kind of cascading drop downs, if you will, they're all set using a Google Sheet. So you don't have to go into frevvo and hard code all those options and then change them if they change. It's all coming from a Google Sheet, so it works with your existing business processes, and it allows that workflow to be super dynamic for them without a lot of IT support. So I wanted to show you real quick before we take questions a couple of other cool things that you can do with Google Maps. So one thing is that you can do geolocation. So we actually have a couple of customers who are police departments, and they might have a form that they want officers to complete in the field on their mobile device or on the computer in their car. And so it's really nice if the form can pick up that user's location and automatically plug it into the form for them. So this geolocation form does exactly that. It basically picks up the latitude and longitude using a business rule behind the scenes, and then it plots that on a map right on the form. So, and of course you could also hard code that latitude and longitude. Let's say you wanted to give people, directions to your wedding reception or something like that. You can hard code that in, and the map will show where your wedding reception is. So lots of cool stuff that you can do with maps that look really nice, or can be very functional if you have those field-based forms. And then the last one we want to show you is a form that integrates with the Google Maps API. Now, there is a little bit of work you need to do to enable this API on the Google side, and there may be a cost associated with that that's separate from frevvo, but usually you can at least do like a trial for free to see how this works. You enable that Google Maps API, and then in your form, you can have your users select locations, and frevvo and Google together will automatically calculate the mileage between those two locations. So let's say that tomorrow I was going to travel from, our office is in Branford, Connecticut to, New York City. And I can see automatically it's populating that is 86 miles for me. Now, let's say I actually needed to go, all the way to Chicago. Well, I can see that that's 873 miles. Or maybe I just want to go to New Haven, which is only 7 miles away. So super dynamic, and this can really streamline your travel requests and expense reimbursements. You can also see down here that frevvo is automatically calculating, if I had, let's say I had multiple trips coming up, and I also needed to then go from, New Haven to LA, it's going to calculate the total there of those two trips for me by the mileage rate, and then show me my total reimbursement amount. So you're completely eliminating the need to do any math, which is fantastic in my opinion. And it also saves a lot of user errors and just makes this whole process so much easier for both the user and whoever processes this type of request. All right, so that is the stuff I wanted to show you, and I see that we do have some questions. So Ashish, do you want to share with me any questions that we have?
Yes, thanks, Megan. There are a lot of questions, so I'm going to start from the top with, is there a cost for the Google connector?
Yeah, there is a cost. This is an add-on to frevvo. And the best thing to do really is to reach out to us here at this info@frevvo.com, or Ashish can probably connect you with an account manager, and we will do a custom quote for you, depending on the size of your organization and what you need.
Right. And there's also, if you just go to our website, there's a contact form there, Megan, that anyone who's interested can always fill in as well. Okay. Oh, yeah,
contact,
right. There's the contact form. Yeah. The next question was, do you have to authenticate with a Google account in order to use the Google connection features?
No, you don't. So the SAML authenticator it's actually its own separate add-on. So you can do just that and no Google connector, or you could do just the Google connector with no authentication. They're totally separate.
That's right. And I think here's another question that I think is related, which is, does the user have to have write access to the Google Sheet with Google Share, or is that handled by frevvo?
You do need to be the owner of the Google Sheet, or at least the OAuth token needs to be the owner of the Google Sheet. And I have seen, we actually ran into this in one of our business forms where we had locked down part of the sheet to, you can like totally lock certain cells, and the Google connector did not like that. It had a hard time writing to it when it was locked. So just make
Right.
sure that whoever owns the Google Sheet is also the OAuth token generator.
Yeah, I think, Megan, the question might have been, does the person who's actually filling out the form need to have access to the
Oh,
right
no,
access to the Google Sheet? And
no.
I believe the
Yeah,
answer is no.
good question. Yeah, and the answer is definitely no. Anyone, you can be a random parent filling out an anonymous form on the website, no connection to your Google account whatsoever, and it'll write. It's
Right.
the designer who needs to have
Right.
that. Mm-hmm.
Right. So basically, the end, in the end, I think it's that frevvo needs access to at least one Google account that owns or has right access to that particular spreadsheet, and then the end users filling out don't have to worry about it. Correct?
Exactly.
Okay.
They don't even need
Great.
to know. It all comes behind the
The next question I think was, you've sort of already answered that, but since it was asked, I'll ask you, does this Google integration require the Google connector? I believe it's
It does
yes.
require the Google connector, yes,
Yes.
and that's
Okay.
a frevvo add-on. Mhm.
Okay. Um, the next question was regarding updates. Regarding the update Google Sheet trigger, how would you prevent a user from updating it more than once?
Mm. Well, I use the trigger for the demo specifically so I could kind of show you the moment that it happens. But you can actually, in your business rule, you can set that up to run on any condition. So you could set it up to run only on form unload, meaning like when the user clicks continue, which they can only do once because then the form will disappear from their view. So, you can pretty much pick whatever condition makes sense for you. A lot of times we do form load or form unload to ensure that that only happens once.
Okay. Okay. Great. The next question was, is it possible on the mileage form for the user to enter a custom address and calculate distance that way, or do they have to be pre-coded locations?
You can enter an
Yeah, I
address.
think you can enter
It's a
anything you
little
want.
easier to demo with the pre-coded ones, but there is kind of a specific syntax you need to use, and so you might have to write a business rule just to make sure that the format is the format that frevvo can, or sorry, Google can read. And let me just go real quick and show you. We actually have a business rule example in our documentation that shows you exactly how to set that up.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it's really nice. So
I didn't know that.
Google Maps API, and this is going to show you kind of exactly how that format needs to happen with the little pluses between each part of
Okay.
that.
Megan, just to be clear, this formatting is handled by the rule. The end user filling out doesn't have to fill it in this format, right? I mean,
That's
I just type in my address and the
and
system will.
Frevvo behind the scenes will reformat it, send it over to Google, and then you'll get an answer back from Google.
Okay, okay. Okay, great. So the end user can fill in a regular address, and we can create the rule. And the bottom line is, yes, it's possible to compute distances between arbitrary addresses.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay. The next question is, can we add map layers to the Google map? I guess I don't know.
I don't know the answer off the top of my head. Our client services team might be able to answer that. I don't. It certainly is not built into the initial or the basic one, but there might be a way.
Yeah, I think that's the map layers is yeah, I don't know. Yeah, yeah. Why don't we, rather than guess, we'll get back to you and find out. Okay. The next one is, how easy or hard is it to convert from original user accounts to SSO with Google?
Going from you can go from the default security manager over to the SAML security manager. It's pretty straightforward. Once you're in SAML, it's a little harder to go back or change to a different security manager. But yeah, you can go from the default frevvo over to SAML. And actually, our security manager docs has some details about how all that works to switch from one to another, and a nice chart helping you choose what you might want.
Okay. Okay. Well, somebody else on the webinar has actually asked a question and answered a question, which basically says that there's actually an API. Apparently, there's a Layers Google Maps API.
There you go.
And so there may be a way to answer that. I'm not sure. Thank you for that information. Another question is, how about enter an address and have it place a pin, I think, on the map was the question. I think that should be possible.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much what the map does. Let me come over here and I'll show you the map again. So the address is, in this case, I'm picking up the address automatically. And then the map automatically puts a pin there. So if you didn't want to do it by default, you could have the user enter the address and then the pin would go. That makes sense.
Super. So the next question is, can we see where roles are established?
Sure, absolutely. So the roles are established here in frevvo. So if I go, I happen to be a designer and an admin, which we don't recommend, but I took a little shortcut for the demo today. So you would log in as the tenant admin and then come over here to manage roles. And you can see all the roles that I have already established. There's a few that are built into frevvo, like frevvo designer is a built-in role that gives you, designer permissions on forms and workflows. But you can also add a role just by clicking add and setting the role name. Really easy. And then to assign that role to users, you would go into the user and just find one here. Whoops, not login. You would just go into the user and add that role to their configuration. Or if you needed to do that in bulk, we have a CSV download that you can do it in bulk and then upload it.
Right. So you can also do that in bulk, right, Megan? With this, and that's via CSV upload, I believe.
That's what I was just saying. So if you wanted to do it in bulk instead of one by one, you would download your user CSV, add that role to all the users that need it, and then re-upload it here to do multiple users in one shot. And then some security managers, depending on how you have them set up, you might be setting up your roles in the security manager.
Right, that's kind of what I was getting at. So with the Google Security Manager, with integrating with Google Google Authentication, I don't believe you can import roles from Google. But with something like Active Directory, where you have groups established in Active Directory, the frevvo Active Directory connection lets you import or synchronize roles with Active Directory, correct?
Yeah.
I believe that's the case. Okay. Okay, another question, I think it's just, can we customize the mobile icons? I assume this refers to the space that you showed on the mobile device.
Absolutely. So you can customize the icon for each individual workflow. So the vacation request I showed you, I actually did customize that thumbnail. You go to this upload thumbnail tool, and then you can pick any of our built-in thumbnails, or you can upload your own image file to use as a mobile thumbnail.
Great. All right, and the final question was, how are you displaying the cell phone?
Oh, I found this little,
honestly,
this is a tool called a power mirror, and it's just a free tool.
Oh, okay.
that allowed me to mirror my cell phone. I have a PC and then an iPhone, so they didn't want to work together very easily without downloading something. But if you have like an iPhone and a Mac, I think they work together seamlessly.
Okay. All right. That's it. Those are all the questions. So thank you so much, Megan. That was
You're
very
very welcome.
informative. I hope
Thank you.
everybody, yeah, I hope everybody found it useful. Please contact us if there's anything further that we can help with or answer. The contact form, that email address, phone, whatever. And Megan, the webinar is being recorded, I see. And so there is a recording. We will, as soon as the recording is processed, probably by tomorrow, we will automatically send out an email to you with a link to the recording of this webinar. Okay? Awesome. Well, thank you everybody for attending.
Thank you guys so much.
Thanks.
Thank you, Sheesh.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.